It's meant to be like your co-CEOs,
Hmm.
not that one of you, like the mother is the one in charge and the father is an underling who's, you know,
Right.
carrying out tasks. That ownership idea, I think, is really good.
Right. Well, also this idea of a practice, right? That means that
Yeah,
you have to work at it, which sounds so counterintuitive, right? I have to
yeah,
work at allowing myself to not be perfect. And then, on the flip side, not feel guilty if I don't do it right. It's like, again, like, let's not get
right.
into another bad cycle. Like self-care, sometimes you have to fight for it, even if it's like imperfect.
If you own it and you just make good decisions for you and you voice your boundaries in a healthy way, people respond to that. Like you said, if you're doing it that way, people get it.
You have to just constantly be like, switching gears in terms of like what you are giving to any particular person, whether it's in your family or
Right.
even at work. And there's always a backlog, right? So you never get through
Yeah.
that backlog. So where do you get any peace?
Hello and welcome. Thank you for doing this today, Kim. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Great. Thanks, Todd. Great to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is of interest to a lot of the people I've worked with over the years, psychotherapy clients and coaching clients, and something that I know a lot of the viewers out there here on our YouTube channel are very interested in. And that's about work-life balance, being a working professional mom and balancing as best you can. And Kim has a new book out called The Beautiful Mess, a Working Mom's Guide to Practicing Imperfection. And I'm really excited about this, Kim. I ordered it immediately when I heard it was released a couple weeks ago, as of the time we
Oh,
did this. For those of you who don't know Kim, Kim Kopecky is a keynote speaker, a sustainability expert, and a working mother of three. She was voted one of the top 100 people to watch in 2023 by the Twin Cities Business Magazine and has held prominent leadership roles in sustainability, communications, and engineering for over 2 decades. Kim is currently the Senior Director of Business Development at Ginkgo Bioworks. She earned a Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of California at Berkeley, go Bears, and a Master's of Business Administration from the Haas School of Business, also at UC Berkeley. I'm really excited. This book just came out, The Beautiful Mess. I've read as much of it as I could before our interview. It's like a directory of topics that I've talked about with working mother clients of mine for the last 2 decades. Just as a full disclosure, we're not new to each other. I've known you, Kim, for, let's not age ourselves, a long time, since
long
college
time.
days.
Again, go
Uh,
Bears.
Go Bears. And at Berkeley, a long time ago, where I was an extension student, and I'm good friends. Yeah, probably good friends with your husband, Dave. And don't tell him I said so. But yeah, I would have loved to have you on, even if I didn't know you, because like I said, this covers so many topics that I know are important to the moms that I've worked with. So let's just start there. What is it about your personal experience, your life experience, that led you to wanting to write this book? Because I know it's not an easy thing to, to fit in writing a book. What was it that led to writing this?
Yeah, thanks, Todd. That's a great setup. So I think, my personal experience, it sounds like, based on your feedback, so many experiences of your clientele and the audience is probably going to resonate is just sort of, really not knowing what to expect as I'm building my career and also building my family with my partner. And the things that were sort of surprising, like, the expectations, the things that you try and kind of like dampen down or hide because you want to be seen as this kind of like corporate professional and someone who can like commit and not really have any compromises on the professional side, but then on the parenting side you're sort of feeling that same pressure, and it's just there's no room for all of it to fit together in like one kind of time frame. So just sort of the clash of that, and just also the ridiculousness of it all, and why are we just not like admitting it and being open about things. I think the pandemic has made all of this so much more transparent, which is great. So I think the conversation is now easier to have, but I think there's still a lot of change that still needs to be made, just in terms of like, how we present ourselves both in office or the Zoom room and also on the soccer field. And, the ways we can have boundaries, the ways we can care for ourselves, the ways we can keep our friendships, the ways we can continue moving forward in our career, even if it's not linear. And so I was just so amazed by my own experience and then the experience of other, mostly women, but men too. I just started jotting some things down like many, many years ago. And, over time just continued to jot things down, and those turned into stories, and those turned into a blog, and the blog turned into a manuscript, and the manuscript now is a book. Now, it wasn't that straightforward, but in general, that's been the progression. And so that's why we have this book, The Beautiful Mess, that I hope will just, give people some ideas, a feeling that you're not alone, and maybe like a laugh or two, because there's comedy in all of this as well. Like we gotta like take a step back and laugh at ourselves a little bit, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've had some laughs reading through some things in the book because, like you said, there are some unique aspects of this to the pressures and expectations towards women versus men. Who, that there's a little bit more of a linear expectation of men, right? That go to work, do your thing, come home, have a scotch and and maybe participate a little bit. It's a different set, but I found as a dad, I did relate to a lot of the things you said in the book as well. And I think a lot of women who are maybe choosing to stay at home right now will also relate to a lot
Mhm.
of the guidance and a lot of the experiences in the book. You said to me in a previous conversation that reading the book Lean In had an unexpected effect on you. And can you explain that?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of appropriate that Lean In's, I think it's 10 years plus old now. And
Oh,
back when it was ready to come out, there was a lot of hype. Sheryl Sandberg, my hero, and I'm like, I can't wait to get
and the
this book.
basic
And then,
premise of the book for people who don't know.
yes, yeah, is you're supposed to kind of like negotiate like a man, have an equal partner, don't leave before you leave. In other words, like if you're going to have a family and you are expecting to leave for maternity leave or any other personal reasons, that you start backing out before you actually leave, don't do that. Like, so she had all this sort of advice, like how to like lean into, your work life mostly. And I read that and I was just deflated because I felt like, wow, even more expectations. And I felt like I was leaning in. Like if I leaned in anymore, I would have fallen on my face. Like I was like a poster child of this lean in thing. And I just felt deflated and I just felt depressed. And I even had two copies. I was just so excited. And I just felt like this isn't the answer I was looking for. So I think at
Yeah.
that point, it's like, well, where's the answer? It's like, well, let me start like looking inward and like looking at my, inner circle here and then growing that over time. So I hope this book is a little bit of what Lean In left out.
Yeah, it's interesting. A couple of people that I learned from, Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who is like kind of my main mentor in parenting, and Dr. Daniel Siegel, who I did some trainings with early on, psychiatrist at UCLA. They both said separately in experiences I had that them writing their book was a response to the same book that came out in the late 90s about parenting and how parents don't really matter. And they were both so
Wow.
offended by this premise. It was by somebody in Berkeley, actually.
Oh,
The book
embarrassing.
was called The Nurture Assumption. And both of them said that they just didn't love the premise of the book that kind of took away from the importance of parents. And so they wrote their first books kind of in response to that. You talk a lot, getting into the practical, you talk a lot, I think in the first section of your book, it's divided really nicely into three different sections. In the first section, you talk about practicing imperfection. Can you say a
Mhm.
little bit more about that and how it kind of looks day to day?
Yeah, it just means that you allow yourself to be imperfect. And that can show up in lots of ways. And then also, like, kind of like being aware of when you're doing things like you're trying too hard, like when you're sort of like overdoing it. And this has happened to me. So, again, nothing to feel guilty about, but like recognizing when you're sort of like trying to like strive for that perfect thing, like I have a number of examples in the book about things like, pushing a project forward when I'm 3 steps ahead of the rest of the team, like, showing up when nobody cares, like like in terms of like your commitment at work, there's not like people don't notice a lot of the stuff you're sacrificing about at work. I think, and even
Hmm.
on like the kid side of thing, I think that guilt on the other side then drives us to try and be more perfect as a parent. Like, making sure I have the perfect swimming lesson and the swimming pool temperature for my 3-year-old. Like, really? She doesn't care, So like, I guess things like allowing yourself to like, okay, this is good enough. I'll never forget. I had this an instructor, teacher instructor, workout instructor at my gym, and she has a kiddo the same age as my youngest, and she said, "You know what? It's the end of the day, and my child is still alive." And I'm like, "Okay, yes, that is what we should be striving for." So that's kind of the flavor of what I mean by that.
Yeah, I find it's always been it's this combination, it seems like external and internal pressure to be perfect, and sometimes
Hmm.
I find that moms don't even know exactly where it's coming from, but there's this really, I think I have to say, if I have 5 or 6 clients a day, I think I have to say, hey, the goal here is not to be perfect, probably 10 times,
Wow.
but there's
Yeah.
just really intense pressure that I've had a couple thousand clients, and I have definitely noticed it more from the moms, you know?
Yeah.
And so
Probably a
to
lot of
invite
conditioning,
it,
right?
yeah, and so to invite, just that idea of practicing imperfection, I think is like a nice concept, to keep in mind.
Well, also this idea of a practice, right? That means that
Yeah,
you have to work at it, which sounds so counterintuitive, right? I have to
yeah,
work at allowing myself to not be perfect. And then, on the flip side, not feel guilty if I don't do it right. It's like, again, like, let's not get
right.
into another bad cycle. Let's just, yeah, like, just kind of be aware as a first step and
Yeah,
then make these
I
tiny baby steps.
yeah, I talk about that all. We throw out the word practice, practice, but it really is. It's like parenting is a practice. It's like not a practice for the real game, but it's a constant noticing and adjusting, and maybe getting better if
Right.
you notice something that you don't like, but not holding yourself to an impossible standard.
Exactly.
Um, in the first part of your book, there's this really great thing that you talk about some of your favorite hacks, some
Oh,
of your
yeah.
favorite working mom hacks. Can you talk a little bit? I
Yes.
remember the scheduling. Can you just say one of your favorite ones there for people?
I know it sounds so silly, but things like how to remember like names, like and some of the scheduling stuff, I think how to weave appointments into the schedule easy. I think it's getting easier than ever to do that. But things like how embarrassed, I think too, this happens too with like busy working moms and dads, where if we're not on the PTA or we're not heading up we're not doing the volunteer coaching of the soccer team, like you don't see those parents all the time, And for me, it's just like, I get so embarrassed, like if I don't know. And even like in the work environment, like just like little things about how to remember people's names, it's just a simple thing. So that's probably one of my favorites. And then just like dealing with like a million tiny little tasks, just sort of practical ways you can sort of like get more clutter out of your head. There's just
Yeah,
been this idea that's been thrown around with some of the productivity circles around this, like, oh, automation, but do as much anything that can be automatic that can get out of your head and into a system, whether it's your calendar or your paper planner or whatever you use, like that's really helpful. Then it opens up your thinking time for kind of like more important, bigger things, right?
totally. And I
So,
loved what you said. You just mentioned in passing to the scheduling, aspect.
oh,
There's
it's
like, it
brutal.
feels like there's this balance point, but because none of us really want to have this totally rigid, have to, life, or make it feel like your kids are in like a prison program or something.
Hmm.
But I just find that having rhythm and predictability is when you can, and having it on the schedule so you're not leaving things to chance, or it
Hmm.
is good for your kids, but it's also good for your sanity, to really lean into that.
Yeah, and who else needs to be on that, right? So like I am sort of the family scheduler planner. Usually there's somebody in the family that's the master scheduler. And so what I've learned is, make sure Dave's copied or grandparents are copied or like so that other people have it in their schedule. I know it sounds so basic, but it helps with like planning, and it helps also not to have like all of that just on you, you know?
Yeah,
So,
have the visibility.
and I'll add one more piece on transparency, and this is a personal choice,
Mhm.
is how transparent do you want that personal schedule to be for your work colleagues, right? So now
Mm.
with our calendaring apps, you can decide, is this a private meeting? Is this not a private meeting? Are you blocking it from a work standpoint? Are you not? Like, how are you putting your boundaries out there? A colleague of mine at Ginkgo just had two little boys, twins, and he has on his calendar, I think at the same time every day, it was just like a very specific thing he had to do with those babies. Maybe it was like a feeding schedule or some sort of schedule, and he was like, he was the it person in at that day at that time. And I thought, that's cool, like, I know to stay away. I'll try not to schedule anything when he's got to take care of the babies. So that's kind of how I can respond to that. Now, that's a personal choice. Not everybody wants to be that transparent, but I'm
Right.
seeing more and more of that, which is like super encouraging. And especially seeing dads do that, I think is super courageous and brave.
Yeah, completely. I'm thinking of something you and I talked about a couple weeks ago. That was this idea of the mental load and the managing of the mental load, which I feel like I was getting from your book in all sorts of different places, right? But it comes up every day in my practice.
Yeah.
It comes up in parent consulting when people are, it kind of leaks in there sometimes. But in marriage counseling, which is about 50% of my work, I do marriage counseling for parents. It comes up every day in the fights between working couples, you know, even where the mom is choosing to be home right now for a little bit with the kids, this comes up. And the idea is that there's this mental, emotional load of being the person in charge of the kids and the decisions in the home, right? That's supposed to be something that the partners share equally, whether one of them's working or not working or working more. You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, it was interesting the way you described it in that little short term. It just like it made sense to me, and I
Yeah.
right away felt it because yeah, it's a lot to carry, especially when you have even with one kid. Like think about multiple kids, multiple jobs, travel, and then arranging, carpools and which one has this carpool and then which one has this test when, and then somebody has an emotional issue, and then so like you have to just constantly be like switching gears in terms of like what you are giving to any particular person, whether it's in your family or
Right.
even at work. And so and there's always a backlog, right? So you never get through
Yeah.
that backlog. So where do you get any peace, right?
Right. And even well-meaning husbands, partners, like your husband's an okay guy, for instance. Um,
He's okay.
he definitely married up. But even well-meaning fathers and other partners will think they're doing the right thing by, hey honey, what should we do about this? Hey honey, what can I do that? And that seems like nice communication and things, but can you explain how that can be burdensome? And what have you discovered as ways to like handle that and to
Yeah.
respond to the mental load concerns?
I think coming in versus like, hey, what should we do about X? Maybe, hey, I'll take this thing. I'll handle, like Dave's been obviously a fantastic partner, still is, but he was like the soccer guy. Like he did all that. I didn't have to worry about that. Or like there's certain just chunks of things. So that's nice. Take on a chunk. He also does the cooking and meal prep. That's a huge
like
chunk.
like own these
Like
chunks, right?
owning different
Yeah.
chunks. Like and some of the stuff happens in a bit of an unspoken way, which I don't know if is good or not. But I've generally been the person who does like the school stuff, and he's generally been the person who does the sports stuff. But when it comes to like carpools and like I would mostly arrange that kind of thing. So I guess just like trying to figure out who owns what. I guess if I'm being asked what about such and so, it's like one more thing on the mental load.
But it's meant to be like your co-CEOs, not
Hmm.
not that one of you, like the mother is the one in charge and the father is an underling who's you know
Right.
carrying out tasks. That ownership idea, I think, is really
Right.
good.
Well, and
This is
maybe sometimes I'm
completely
the
off
sub.
your plate.
Right.
Oh
And
yeah,
maybe I'm the
yeah,
sub in some of these. Like, I guess though, the only thing I would say is I've been the master of the schedule, which is a lot, I'd say right there, just the scheduling in general. And then I'll say sometimes if something goes wrong, it's like, it's like, I don't know, it just feels like it's just so on me because I did the schedule, like, but the nanny doesn't show up. I get the phone call, like, what's going
right,
on, like, and I
right.
get that, but yeah, it's
And I'd imagine, since you have three girls, um, that some of that is like also going on, right? That, oh well,
mhm.
you're the woman, you're the female, right?
You're
So
the mom, they're going to come to
because
you. Yeah.
yeah, right. In part two of your book, you talk about how to lead from the inside. Can
Hmm.
you say a little bit more about that idea? Because I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think, leadership really has to come from within. And there's been a lot out there around authentic leadership and vulnerability and that kind of thing. It's a tough balance, right? Because you don't want to be, people want to follow someone that they look up to, right? But at the same time, you need to be a human being. And also, you could be a leader and not necessarily be in a certain spot in the org chart, right? So, or you may move around the org chart and it may not always be up. So, how do you maintain kind of your leadership posture and your leadership kind of principles when you're not always getting that external validation of leadership? So it's really around that because to me that's something that's more persistent is, if you're leading from the inside and what are those things you're focusing on if you lead from the inside versus when you lead from the outside, which is maybe I'm focusing on where I am in the org chart or when's my next promotion or and those are all important things, but they can't be the only things.
Right, right. I'm thinking now of part three of your book, where there's a lot of really practical, ideas and ways to implement, and some really great concepts. There was three in particular that I noted, but we can go anywhere with this. Any ideas you have or things you want to speak to? But I like the idea of opting out gracefully, and I think you also say and forgiving yourself. But
Right.
what is opting out gracefully? And tell me more about how that might look, for people, or how it's looked for
Right.
you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it's so hard to say no. And especially when it's something that maybe you sort of marginally even are interested in doing. But I mean, I think you need to think about when you say yes to something, what are you saying no to? Especially with your time and that mental load as well. It's like, wow, I signed up for that book club. Oh, it's on Thursday. I don't know if I want to go on Thursday. Get that feeling like that, when you see it on the calendar and just maybe try and take a beat before you say yes or no to anything and really think through like, okay, well, how's this going to affect my schedule and my time, and this is a priority for me versus it's a priority for someone else and I want to be nice, I don't want to say
Yeah.
yes. And I think people understand, and especially too, like with going through this pandemic, I feel like that some of our attitudes have changed a little bit on some of these things, but I think it's important. And I mentioned this kind of story of a friend of mine who I know this sounds really terrible, but she would like sometimes she'd get invitations to parties or even kids' birthday parties sometimes and just like throw them out and not even like acknowledge. I'm not saying, to do that necessarily all the time, but it was her way of like, yeah, like I can't even deal with it. But we're talking about somebody who's a doctor who takes call and he can't
Yeah.
really, yeah, blame her there. But yeah, I think it's just like allowing yourself permission to opt out and thinking through like, there's lots of ways to do that without sort of offending that other person, right?
Yeah. It comes up so much when you're working as a psychotherapist and as a parenting coach, the idea of boundaries, and
hmm
boundaries is almost like this generic word that people throw out there. But I guess the way I think about it when you're talking is like, if it, like it's almost like the membrane of a cell. Like if you're speaking to you about cell membranes and things,
I
so
think
forgive
about
me,
cell
but
membranes every
yeah,
day.
or your husband, but if the membrane is totally like permeable, everything can come in, that's not good. If you
Right.
keep everything out, that's not good. But it has to be about letting in what nourishes you and keeping out what doesn't. And I guess
hmm
what I find practically is like, if you own it, and you just make good decisions for you and you voice your boundaries in a healthy way, people respond to that. Like you said, it's that if you're doing it that way, people get it. But oh, I better make up an excuse and I better, that's more where people pick up something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That they kind of feel like something's wrong and she's made up the same excuse 5 times. Where I think if you really own it and go, I would love to be there, but I can't. I'm out. I'm out of energy. My
Yeah.
tank's empty. That people like another like working mom, for instance, will be like, I totally get it. And you're in a way, you're
Yes.
giving them permission to do it themselves,
Yeah.
right?
You're
Because
modeling that.
they might be thinking
Mhm.
that they can't do that, that that's not acceptable. So you're
Yeah.
giving them a model of healthy boundaries. And another one, and I talk about this a lot, done a couple videos on this on YouTube so far, but practicing imperfect self-care. I don't always phrase it that way, but tell me more about practicing imperfect self-care, how important it is, and maybe some things you've learned to do that people can learn from.
Yeah, definitely. And we're all still practicing the boundary thing too, by the way. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
perfect at that, but at least, yeah,
yeah.
being aware. But yeah,
It's a
translating that,
lifelong.
lifelong, yeah, that
Yeah.
imperfection thing goes throughout our lives and throughout the book for sure. But I mean, it's things like, I have a chapter called "I'm a lame friend." I'm a lame friend. I have this story of like, okay, I have a bunch of friends. Their birthdays are all clustered at the same time. Like, okay, I'm going to get physical birthday cards. I'm going to mail them. It's going to feel good and special. And I mean, literally, I have a picture of the three cards that's sitting there. I bought the cards. Did I mail them? No. I mean, it's like, okay, oh crap, it's not going to get there in time. Text message, it's like, it's better than nothing, So yes, I'm a lame friend, but at least I'm keeping contact. I'm keeping up with my friendship. So that's one. And keeping your friends is a sort of self-care, right? It's important. I think the other piece is right, your sleep, right? And I used to think sleep was weakness. I used to
Yeah.
say, okay, I don't want any more than 6 hours of sleep because I'm going to work. I'm going to do the mom thing, and I had a friend who used to get to the office at 6 a.m. just to do an hour or so of kid scheduling before she started her work,
Hmm.
And then I read this book about why we sleep, and I was
Oh, I
terrified
read
at,
that.
oh, yeah, it's like behind me.
That was
Um,
Walker
Matthew Walker.
from
Yeah.
yeah, from
And I was
Berkeley, I think.
from Berkeley. Read it if you can, highly recommend, but it's terrifying in a sense that, like, how much sleep is important. And I changed my mindset completely about sleep. But it's hard because in the corporate world, I had a boss that used to praise people constantly for working nonstop and getting a thing done and being a hero. So we are
Yeah.
not getting very good, healthy messages. At least I wasn't.
No.
So you're
No.
going against the grain, in that sense. Self-care, sometimes you have to fight for it, even if it's like imperfect. And if I don't get kind of, my new minimum of sleep, but then sometimes I kind of kick myself. But like, again, let's just make it as good as we can. Or like the whole, oh, I'm going to do yoga every day. It's like, God, do it once a week. Great. Like, let's just lower the bar. I'm going to go to the gym every day. Well, go for a walk once a week. Great. I mean, it's just lower the bar for all of it. And just like
Yeah.
whatever you can do is good. Just be, and I have to remind myself too, like, oh, what a stupid little workout that was. Well, at least I did something, like just,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, how many times do I pack my workout stuff for my work trip and I don't work out when I'm traveling? Probably 50%. But for that
Right.
other 50%, great. Like, I just got back from Orlando. Do you think I hit that stupid little gym? I did not. Did I bring my workout stuff? I did. So it's
Right.
okay.
Right. But if you set the bar, you had to every time, and then you just felt bad about yourself for
Yeah,
not doing it, then you're in that
right.
shame spiral and you don't ever get it done. So I think
Exactly.
that's really valuable and really, really sleep is just something that I've become more and more adamant about over the years. I was looking back on my bookshelf. Why We Sleep is up there, and a book called Sleep Smarter is up there. But yeah, I mean, more people crash their car because of sleep, not having enough sleep than drinking, right? Which is not a
Yeah.
message to go drink and drive. It just,
No.
it just means that like it definitely affects your cognition. It affects your ability to do things and be efficient, and it just drives me a little
Hmm.
crazy sometimes when I still see the culture out there of certain people who I actually respect and like in a lot of ways putting out Instagram videos about I'm up at 4:30 a.m. doing my
Yeah.
workout. And I'm like, is that is that really
Oh
great?
my
I mean, I'm glad you're
gosh.
getting in your workout, but I
Yeah.
mean, what I know about cognition and how the brain works is that's not. And I was just over in Japan for 6 months last year, and it's a prevalent thing over there too. That sleep is weakness, or not
Yeah.
everybody, but it's a
It's
thing.
cultural. In the last week, I've had two people tell me they get up at 4:30 in the morning, like it's a braggy thing, and it shouldn't
Yeah,
be. I guess unless you're going to bed at 8, but I doubt it.
yeah, probably not. And one more thing about that section on in part three of your book, where you had a lot of the practical. You talk about this idea of can you have it all? Can you say a little bit more about your experience with that, and any guidance you'd give fellow working moms or any parents watching this?
Sure. Yeah, the whole have it all thing. Well, first of all, I'll just address work-life balance. I think that's something that's a myth, and
Hmm.
I think it's just like making it work, whatever that looks like. And it could be balanced, it could be unbalanced. You could have a day where it's like it's all work and no family and too bad. And it could be another day where like you got to do family stuff and work's got to take a back seat. So I don't know if that's balanced or not, but I think it's just like making it work. And then there's this new term out like, oh, work-life harmony. It's like that's just another way of saying the same thing. It's just one more pressure. So just let
Hmm.
that work-life balance, let it go. It's okay. You don't have to try and achieve balance. It's all right. But the other piece about having it all, it just depends on what you mean. What's it all for you? What is
Yeah.
that? As long as it's not some like external definition you're striving for, you have to figure out what is your have it all. And yeah, sure, you can have it all for you as you define it. Can you do perfectly? Hell no. But I say yes to have it all. I say no to work-life balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, excellent. Okay, Kim. Well, we could probably go on for a couple more hours, and
Yeah.
maybe we can find a time to do this again. But thank you so much for being here. I want to recommend to everyone out there that any of this resonated with to go to Amazon and look for The Beautiful Mess. It's really a great read. It's very accessible, just filled with, you know, look at this, try this, in some funny. I love your sense of humor in it. And you talked about your journey at the beginning of putting out blog posts and putting out things slowly over the years. I've been watching them all, even though you and I haven't been speaking about it all the time. You're half a country away. Um,
Yeah.
I've been following it, watching the journey, and I'm just so excited that you put this out. And I know it's going to be a great resource for a lot of the moms out there. I want to recommend to everybody also to go check out kimkupiecki.com. If you wonder about the spelling, you're not alone. It'll be in the description below. And you can find Kim's socials there. You can find her really great blog that she continues to update. And sign up for her newsletter, which I know is a really great resource as well. So again, Kim, thank you so much for being there. Say hi to that husband of yours for me,
I will
and
too.
hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, Todd. Take care.